Hey guys, James here. Today in this video I'm going to show you how to repair a water damaged plaster ceiling. Before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the tools you're going to need and a little disclaimer. I'm not a professional plasterboarder or drywaller. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades and I think I'm pretty handy at this sort of stuff, but there are better guides out there if you want to learn the techniques of how to plasterboard or how to actually do plastering properly. But for a general sort of all-round how-to, I think I'm across it. So first of all, tools that we're going to need, starting with the repair, hammer and tape. You're going to need a power saw or a hand saw to cut some of the timbers for framing around the opening, a gyprock saw, Stanley knife for cutting the new plasterboard, probably a battery drill, level for marking out where your cut's going to go, 2 coats of base coat, 1 coat of topping coat, which is the final coat that you can sand, clean bucket, 3 sets of trowels, small, medium and large, sanding block, drop sheets, obviously before you get started, that's pretty important to put them down to protect the carpet. You know, paintbrush and roller, some primer undercoat for the raw plasterboard, and then you're going to need your finished coat of paint. Alright, I'll put a link below in the comment section to some of these tools that you need so you can look that up later. But let's get started with the repair. Alright, so you can see this ceiling's pretty bad. It's got quite a sag in it through the middle here. It's been waterlogged for such quite a long time that it's set pretty hard with this dip in it. Sometimes you can re-screw them back up, but this one is quite wet, quite waterlogged, so we'll cut it out. So first thing you need to do is just determine the size. Take it back to where the ceiling is flat, and you can do that by sticking a level up here and just seeing where the ceiling's okay. You can see I can fit my fingers under each side as touching the ceiling. My sheet that I've got is 1200 wide, so measuring back from that bulkhead is pretty much about where it stops rocking. So the next thing I like to do is open up a little section in the ceiling where the worst affected area is. You know, maybe a couple hundred millimeters, just so you can get your head up there and have a bit of a look and see which way the rafters or the joists are running. Take a little gyprock saw. But there's still a bit of water damaged plasterboard there, so I'm going to take this right the way back to that bulkhead, and then I'll stick my hand up and see how far back to the timber this side, and then I'll cut it back that way. And same across this way, and same across the back, just to try and get an area where you can actually get back to timbers. A little light, pop up and see where some of these timbers are. Okay, so you can see our next timber is back here, because over here where our hole is, it's pretty sag still until it gets back to about here. So I think I have to chop it all the way back to at least this one. And then over here on the side, you guys can see that, but that's where the joint is on the sheet. It's past this timber here, but it's still pretty sagged at this timber all the way back through, so I think I'll cut it back there. And then on the other side of that light fitting, the other joint in the sheet runs back through there. So now that I know where my timbers are, I'll just keep cutting through. Now that I've hit the timber, I'll just continue back along the side of the timber till I get to the joint in this sheet, and then back along the joint. So this 2 corners are looking fine. It's really just this side here that's still water damaged. And ideally it'd be great if I could cut it on those timbers and then we can just basically fix the sheet up. But it's too wet still in that area, so I'm gonna have to go back further than these timbers here. So what I'll do is I'll measure the full width of a sheet, back here 1200. I'll see what it's looking like at the joint. I'll cut that all the way back, and then we can basically get a 1200 sheet just into this patch area. So you can see here, this is the sheet that I'm gonna use. Width-wise measures 1200, so perfect for that patch up there. Okay, so that's the dirty work done. All the plasterboard's cut out. Next stage now is the trimming. We're going to put timber trimming around the edges of this, basically for 2 reasons. Number 1, so the old plaster that still might have some slight deflections, deflections I should say, is screwed back up nice and straight. And 2, that our new plasterboard's got something to screw up to as well. And now a little tip. Once you've done the demolition, keep a piece of the ceiling sheet that you've got there if it's painted, so that way you can match the colour. Now it's simply a matter of cutting our blocking to size all the way around so we can trim out the opening. Now that they're cut, it's a matter of sliding these blocks in so it's half on each side of the sheet up here. Now what that's going to do, even though there's still a sag in part of this sheet, this trimmer, we can actually screw up to that in a couple of places and pull the sheet back up flush. Now that's all blocked up, we've just got to prepare the rest of this ready for the gyprock. So it's time to remove any old glue and screws that might be left on the old rafters. Next step now is to take some plasterboard screws and secure the existing plasterboard back up to these battens that we've fixed in. Now the opening's prepped, it's just a matter of measuring for this sheet. Now we just mark the plasterboard, top and bottom, use a Stanley knife to score the back of the paper, we cut it to size. Yep, it's going to fit. I also just need to mark out the hole for where my downlight's going to go so I can pull that through. Now just apply a little bit of glue just to some of the center rafters. You're not going to believe it, but I stuffed up, I put it on the wrong side. Oh well, this video has now turned into how to patch a ceiling as well, because I'm going to have to patch that hole up. The trick to putting these screws in is making sure that you don't pull it past the face of the gyprock. You only just want to go slightly in, but not so you break the paper. If you go too far in, they pop through the actual plasterboard. So there you go, one sheet in with my stuff up and all. Now it's time to get ready to set these joints. We're going to put some tape on here, fill them with plaster, and we'll patch this hole while we're going. Okay, so now that we're going to start on our setting, some of the things that we need are some tape. So for butt joints and things, I think we'll go with a paper tape. Some of the tools, you've got your little broad knife, 4-inch, then you go up to say a 6-inch, and then I think a 12, and then above to, that could be a 12. First product we're going to use is called a base coat, and that goes in a 2-coat system. So you put it on one with your tape, then you come back over it with a second coat after it's dried, and then we finish it off with what we call a top coat. But first of all, take a little 4-inch scraper and just run it along all the edges just to make sure that there's nothing hanging down. If there's any old bits of paper or anything like that in the way, just get your Stanley knife and just try and cut those old bits of plaster. Okay, so now we're going to mix up this base. Add a little bit of water to a clean bucket. Don't want it too runny. We also don't want it too stiff. So it's actually looking pretty good. Let that set for, the manufacturer says, 10 or 15 minutes, but we'll let it stand for a little while and then we'll apply it. While we let that mud sit for a couple of minutes, we'll repair my little stuff up from earlier. Okay, so depending on what timber you got laying around for the patch, I've got a bit of 90, so I'm just going to open it up so that I can actually fit this timber through for the patch. Okay, so the trick here is to take, say, a 50mm screw and just put it in the center. What that does, that gives you something to hold on to. Now you might ask, why do we put tape on the joints? Basically it's to reinforce it. If you just put mud in there, if there's movement between the two surfaces, you'll get a crack along that joint. So it just basically holds the two surfaces together, binds them, and once you put your mud over it, it just makes it a nice stiff joint. Get a little dab, and then just start coming along into your joints. Pushing a little bit of mud in as you go to try and fill any voids there may be. Starting from one end, pull it straight, just lightly work your way along with your hand and then come back over it with the trowel just to set it in a little bit. Now once that's up there, you don't want to pull it too hard because you don't want to stretch the tape out. Okay, so there you go guys, that's first coated. So we've got the tape in, the width of our first trowel. So you're really just a matter of reinforcing it. You don't want too much mud in so it's not sitting too proud. And it also doesn't matter if it's a little bit ugly on the first coat because we've got 2 more coats to go after this. We're going to use the middle-sized trowel next to go over it with another base coat. Where you've got butt joints, they say you should fan it out probably at least about 400 millimeters, just so that you take out any imperfections. If you had a standard recess joint where recess joint was meeting each other, you only probably have to go as wide as this trowel really, just to fill it in and get a nice smooth surface. Generally like to start in the middle and sort of pull it back, just to get it on, and then you can smooth it out with the trowel. So what I mean by feathering the edges, it's almost like holding the trowel on a bit of an angle, this is exaggerated, and putting pressure on the outside corner so that it just tapers it from nothing back in towards the joint. Okay, so that's second coated. Now like I mentioned before, I'm no plastering expert, so don't go too harsh on me. But main thing is not to leave any lumps and bumps. Just try and spread it out, maybe a trowel width wider than what your first broad knife. Then we put a top coat over this, which we then feather out wider again. And because it can be sanded, you can then sort of take out any imperfections just by rubbing it back and getting it nice and neat. All right, now it's time for the very last coat. This is what we call a top coat, and it's a pre-mixed product. We can just skim over the top. Just a nice creamy consistency. All right, for the final coat, your widest trowel, just to spread it out nice and wide over these butt joints. All right, there's definitely a bit of an art to that. Like I said, I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm pretty happy with that. It's on reasonably thin enough so that now when it dries, I can come back and sand it. Okay, so we're back, and the ceiling's dry and ready for sanding. You can use your little sanding block with a bit of sandpaper on the bottom of it, a sanding pad, or you've got these little sanding blocks that you can get. You can see there with the tapered edges, you can pick those up from your little plasterboard supplier. Now, just a matter of starting in the middle and then working your way out to sort of feather the edges. Whew, that's dusty work. Fun stuff. Flush back where it's supposed to be. Now for a good 3-in-1 primer to seal that plasterboard. Alright, so there you have it guys. One water damage ceiling repaired. So you saw it being cut out, plastered and painted. It's not really that hard to do, so I hope it gives you some inspiration to get out there and actually try and tackle a project like this yourself. Hardest part is probably getting the setting right with the plastering. Watch some YouTube videos, have a bit of practice and you'll work it out. Alright, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers guys.